Hello. Now that the dust over the Union Budget 2025-26 has settled down, it is worth attempting a dispassionate analysis of the main proposals in the Union Budget and their potential effects. In her speech, Finance Minister has mentioned four areas of focus, namely the poor, the youth, the farmer, and women. She has also mentioned four engines of development, namely agriculture, MSMEs, investments, and exports. But instead of going into those categories, I will classify the budget proposals into three categories. I will talk about how the finance minister has managed an impossible trinity. So, an impossible trinity is one where out of three objectives, any two can be chosen, but not all three. So, the impossible trinity that the finance minister has managed are growth stimulus, fiscal discipline, and populism. Usually, you can meet any two out of the three, but let me explain how finance minister has managed all three. So let's dig in. GDP growth has been slowing down. GDP growth rate was only 5.4% in the second quarter of FY25, and the National Statistics Office estimates GDP growth to be 6.4% in the full year FY25, mainly due to slowdown in manufacturing output and consumption. Job surveys show that good quality jobs are not getting created. So, how does the budget propose to boost job creation, output, and consumption, which means boost GDP growth and yet maintain fiscal discipline? Let's start with fiscal discipline. But first, remember that when we are talking of budget proposals, these are really plans for FY26, that is from 1st April 2025 to 31st March 2026. And we are going to compare those budget estimates with what has actually happened in the financial year 24-25 that will be ending on 31st March 2025. Now, budget proposals are essentially promises for the next year. So let's start with the fiscal promises. We measure fiscal discipline with fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is the difference between what the government spends and what the government earns. Now, this gap is called fiscal deficit and it is financed through borrowing. Whom does the government borrow from? Primarily from the bond markets, where the government sells government bonds and raises money to finance the fiscal deficit. These bonds are purchased by banks and other financial institutions, including foreign portfolio investors, using the money that has been saved by those who are able to put money in banks and in other financial assets. So essentially, it is people like you and me who lend to the government through the banks to finance the fiscal deficit. So what's going on with fiscal deficit? Fiscal deficit for FY26 is estimated at 4.4% of GDP, which is lower than 4.5% as per the previously estimated glide path that was promised a year back. And the fiscal deficit at 4.4% is lower than 4.8% in FY25. The government has achieved this reduction in fiscal deficit by cutting down many subsidies such as petroleum subsidies and fertilizer subsidies, and by redirecting spending towards areas with high employment and output potential. The government has actually under-promised and over-delivered as far as fiscal deficit is concerned. With this kind of fiscal consolidation, debt GDP ratio is set to fall to 50% by 2031. Such a decrease in the public debt will indicate a strong government finance, helping to improve sovereign ratings and attract more foreign investments in the years to come. Revenue deficit is the difference between revenue spending, that is day-to-day spending of the government, and revenue receipts, that's mostly tax receipts and a few non-tax receipts as well. So this revenue deficit has fallen from 1.9% of GDP in FY25 to 1.5% in FY26. The effective revenue deficit, which means revenue deficit minus grant in aid given to states for capital expenditure. That is nearly zero at 0.3% in FY26. This is excellent news. Some have, however, expressed concern about these estimates, saying that how will these revenue deficit reductions and fiscal deficit reduction be achieved when income tax collection has been projected to grow by 14.4% despite income tax cuts and an expected nominal GDP growth rate of only 10.1%. But note that the tax foregone due to the tax cuts is only 1 lakh crore rupees, which is quite small out of a total tax revenue of 43 lakh crore rupees. And income tax collected by government grew by 20.3% in FY25, even when nominal GDP growth was lower at 9.7%. So it's quite likely that if nominal GDP growth rate goes up even though marginally to 10.1%, income tax collection will certainly grow by more than 14%, if not by 20%. Therefore, the tax collection projection is quite conservative, and the government may actually surprise by eventually producing a stronger fiscal consolidation or by spending more on capital expenditure in FY26. Now, what about reviving economic growth? Capital expenditure or capex is the building block of productivity and long run growth. The government strategy in the past few years has been to prioritize capital expenditure, that is, in construction of roads, ports, railways, and other infrastructure, while slowing down revenue expenditure by rationalizing subsidies. This year also, revenue expenditure has been estimated at growing by only 6.7%, whereas capex will grow by 10.1% in FY26. In fact, if we include the grant in aids given to state governments for capex spending, then the total capital expenditure known as effective capex is set to rise by a whopping 17.5%. But the catch here is that the actual revenue expenditure in FY25 is almost the same as was budgeted for FY25. But the capital expenditure in FY25 has actually turned out to be lower than what was budgeted. So the budgeted capital expenditure for FY25 was 11.1 lakh crore rupees, but actually the government spent lower, that is 10.2 lakh crore rupees, and is now estimating a higher capital expenditure of 11.2 lakh crore rupees for FY26. So the budget estimate in FY26 for capital expenditure compared to the budget estimate of FY25 is an increase of only 1%. And if you include the grant in aid to the states, then effective capex will grow by only 3% compared to what was the budget estimate for FY25. Now, I said earlier that when it comes to fiscal deficit, the government under promises and over delivers. But it turns out that in the case of capex, the government had over promised and under delivered in FY25. And that's one of the reasons that GDP growth rate had slowed down. So let us hope that the government does not do so in FY26 and it actually spends the amount of capex that it has promised to spend, especially since with the conservative income tax projections, there is going to be scope for even higher spending on capex than what has been budgeted. So, where is the increase in spending going to happen in FY26? The fastest growth in spending is in the internship scheme. The new internship program, which was announced in the last budget in July, has been given 10,000 crore rupees of allocation. In fact, in FY25 already, over 28,000 people have got job offers and 61,000 people were trained in the pilot phase of the internship scheme. And this is going to get a massive boost in FY26 because of the increased allocation, creating jobs and boosting GDP. Other than the internship scheme, there is a generous allocation of 20,000 crores for new employment generation schemes. Again, something that was announced in the last budget in July. There has been a massive allocation of 67,000 crores on the Jal Jeevan mission. and this allocation is a rise by 195%. The objective is to achieve water for all by 2028, a very, very important objective as far as the nation is concerned. Now let's look at manufacturing. There are a number of proposals on manufacturing, such as setting up of a national manufacturing mission with focus on improving ease of doing business and reducing cost of doing business and improving skilling and improving production in electronics, footwear, leather, cotton and textile industries, and also green technologies. The budget has promised that India will become a global hub for toys, but that could be difficult because China is the world leader and there's a lot that India has to do to catch up. But this is certainly a very important job creating sector other than electronics, footwear, leather, and textile, which the government has promised to give a boost to. There are many initiatives proposed for the MSMEs. Investment and turnover limits for classifying companies as MSMEs have been increased by 2.5 times for the investment limit and 2 times for the turnover limit, which means many more companies can be classified as MSMEs and will get the benefits that are reserved for MSMEs. The budget has proposed to enhance credit guarantee to MSMEs, and credit cards have been promised for micro enterprises. So these will improve the flow of credit to small and micro businesses. Shipbuilding clusters have been proposed to set up, which will boost MSMEs in those regions. Export promotion mission will be set up with targets which will help the MSMEs. A fund of funds has been promised for startups with an allocation of 10,000 crore rupees. An enhanced credit guarantee to startups will improve fund flow to these companies. The budget has promised to extend the tax holiday period of startups by an additional 5 years. And the finance minister has announced a new scheme for first time entrepreneurs, particularly from weaker sections. Coming to the very important agriculture sector, there are the usual polite noises on agricultural productivity through crop diversification, improved storage facilities, irrigation facilities, and credit. Grameen credit score will be given by PSU banks, so that will improve credit flow to agriculture. Kisan credit card limit has been proposed to be raised from 3 lakh rupees to 5 lakh rupees, which will improve liquidity in the hands of farmers. But there are no transformative steps announced for the agriculture sector, which remains a low productive sector and underperforms in the Indian economy. The next growth driver I'll talk about is tourism. Top 50 destinations will be developed in partnership with states. The budget proposes to strengthen the Heal in India program, relax visa requirements for visiting tourists, modernize airports and railways, modify the Udan scheme, reduce GST rates for hotels and travel operators. These will help the tourism sector, and tourism is a driver of semi skilled employment and GDP growth. Also, for job creation, the budget has proposed a national framework to develop GCCs, that is, Global Capability Centers, in Tier 2 cities that will help to produce a large number of skilled jobs. Now, I talked about schemes to revive growth in the short run, but what about future growth of the economy? To secure the future of the country, there's a new allocation of 5,600 crore to Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserve Limited and rupees 410 crores to Critical Minerals Mission. Now, these are very important areas which will ensure energy security and critical resource security for the country. The budget has proposed 20,000 crores to support private sector driven innovation, including in deep tech. The budget has proposed 10,000 crores for an urban challenge fund that will transform cities. The budget has allocated 7,000 crores for semiconductor development, which is twice the amount that was spent in FY25. The finance minister has allocated 3,000 crores for ITI upgradation, which is 10 times that money spent in FY25. The budget has promised 10,000 additional medical seats and 6,500 additional seats in the new IITs. These proposals will help to build the foundations for future growth in productivity of the nation. Continuing on the theme of long run prosperity and growth, the budget has promised a set of reforms, starting with power sector reforms and mining sector reforms. The budget has announced 100% FDI in the insurance sector, which will attract international insurers to Indian economy and infuse capital to help enhance insurance coverage. The budget has promised a Jan Vishwas Bill 2.0 to decriminalize over 100 provisions in agriculture, labor, and commerce. The finance minister has promised to set up a high level committee for regulatory reforms to recommend reforms in the non financial services sector. The Financial Sector Development Council, which is like a coordinating body for the financial sector comprising of all the regulators, will recommend financial sector reforms. The budget has proposed an investment friendliness index of states, but all these proposals would be already ready with the Niti Aayog. So it is not very clear what is going to take the government so long to come up with these proposals because they need immediate attention and implementation. Finally, the populism in the budget. The populist part is fulfilling the middle class's wish for income tax cuts. The budget has modified the tax slabs so that there is going to be savings for taxpayers in all categories. Those earning up to rupees 12 lakh annually have a bonanza because they will receive a 100% rebate and hence end up paying no tax. The budget has raised the threshold for TDS and TCS in various payments, which will improve the cash flow in the hands of the common people, particularly for gig workers and small taxpayers. What will the tax cuts do? There will be some consumption boost with the tax foregone of 1 lakh crore rupees getting injected into the economy, but this amount that will be in the hands of taxpayers is going to be partly saved by them and partly spent by them. And therefore, the multiplier effect will be quite small, most likely not more than 1 lakh crore rupees, which is the actual amount of money being foregone by the government from these tax changes. This is hardly 0.3% of GDP. Therefore, although it does not do much to the economy, it certainly creates goodwill among the vocal middle classes by providing them some relief. Certainly, taxpayers deserve relief because tax slabs are not inflation linked. So, whenever inflation goes up, the tax slabs need to be adjusted from time to time. Lastly, very few people noticed the budget has done preemptive tariff cuts to deflect any action by Donald Trump. The budget has cut import duties on cars, motorcycles, bicycles, yachts, and certain capital goods. It is going to make some American imports into India cheaper, including Harley Davidson and Tesla cars, as I had predicted in an earlier video. Let's hope that with these tariff cuts, India can escape tariff action which Trump has imposed on China, Canada, and Mexico. In sum, the budget has managed the impossible trinity of reviving growth, continuing with fiscal discipline, and populism. It's not an inflationary budget, as despite the tax cuts, fiscal deficit is lower and capex has been prioritized. So the RBI will heave a sigh of relief. The budget lays strong foundations for both short run and long run growth. But as usual, what matters is the implementation of the promises at the end of the day. As they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We will have to wait and see. Do let me know what you thought of the union budget in the comments below.